There are 5 financial rules of thumb that almost every retiree has heard. They're all over the internet, they're on YouTube, and your favorite coworker or neighbor has probably quoted one of these to you at least once or twice over a meal. However, the problem is each and every one of these rules of thumb can fail in retirement. Not because these are bad ideas in theory, but it's because retirement doesn't play by average rules. Today, I'm going to walk you through all 5, talk to you about how they can break down, and give you some things to think about instead. Let's get into it. The first one is the 4% rule. This is the granddaddy rule of thumb for retirement planning. The 4% rule, as it is often referred to, is actually not a rule. This was a finding in research that was done back in 1994 by Bill Bengen. And many people latched onto this research and this finding and made it the rule of thumb for retirement income planning. The idea is simple. Take your portfolio. There's a specific mix that Bengen used in his research, and you should be able to withdraw 4% adjusted for inflation, and that money should last for 30 years. So what's the problem with the 4% rule? Well, a few things. First, it presupposes a set portfolio mix. If you have 50-50 stocks to bonds or 75-25 or different asset classes, the results may vary. And Bengen even updated his research and added some additional asset classes. His research has actually improved withdrawal rates, but the issue is that market averages or historical averages are only a guideline. They can't be guaranteed to repeat themselves in the future. We've all heard this mantra repeated: past performance is no guarantee of future results. This is just showing what would have happened, what would be okay. It has no bearing on what's guaranteed to happen in the future. The second thing, and probably my biggest issue with the overall 4% spending rule, is the fact that it projects out a linear spending path, which most people don't spend money the same in retirement. We spend differently. So if you are going to have a linear spending path, you can show mathematically how that might work, but it leaves no room in the analysis for spending shocks, surprise things, unexpected expenses, or unexpected opportunities to do some really cool stuff in retirement that you hadn't planned for on your spreadsheet. In fact, there's been research that shows many people spend more money in the early years of retirement, and then over time, their spending tends to decline gradually until their later years where it spikes again. It looks more like what they call a retirement smile. We have more spending in our early years, or the go-go years, and then we tend to slow down in the slow-go years, and then later on we have the no-go years where we're kind of done, but our healthcare expenses may actually spike because cost of healthcare tends to increase towards our later years in life. And the third thing with the 4% rule is it does not account for the impact of sequence risk on a portfolio. Sequence of return risk, or experiencing a poor order of returns early in retirement, can absolutely decimate a retirement income portfolio. And if you've planned on taking withdrawals or distributions from a portfolio and that portfolio is going down in value, well, you've heard of dollar cost averaging, right? Where you're pulling money out of a portfolio that is declining in value, it could absolutely crush a retirement income portfolio. And so this is one of probably the biggest issues I have with the default 4% rule with no other thinking or planning involved. I'll wrap up this rule of thumb saying I don't believe that the 4% rule is useless. I think it's a great starting point for people who are asking themselves questions about, will I have enough to retire and how much money do I need to retire? It gives a good mental framework to start thinking through the math. But by no means do I think that this is a foolproof retirement income strategy. Remember, assumptions are not a plan. Rule number 2, the rule of 100. You take your age, subtract it from 100, and that number is the percentage of your overall portfolio that you should have invested in equities. So if you are 65, take 65 from 100 and you have 35. So 35% of your portfolio should be invested in stocks, and 65% of your portfolio could be or should be invested in something safer, like some type of fixed income, short-term fixed income, a bond ladder. And this is often a rule that is used by people who are looking to, use annuities or sell annuities as part of a retirement income plan. And before you think any certain way about annuities, they are a viable strategy, but also I can't stand rules of thumb because everybody is unique. Their planning and spending needs are unique. And so I don't like a cookie cutter approach to putting together retirement income strategies. I think all of us, all of you deserve better. So the rule of 100 states that you should take your age, subtract 100, and then therein lies your magical portfolio mix. Well, I fundamentally disagree with that because that ignores some big things as it relates to risk. First of all, is the risk of inflation and the loss of their purchasing power over time. One of, at least in my opinion, one of the greatest ways we can offset the impacts of inflation are buying assets or asset classes that have a historical track record of being able to outpace inflation and give us real rates of return over and above the rate of inflation. If you're not investing in those asset classes, then you are likely treading water, or worse, potentially losing purchasing power. And therein lies the rub, right? Because this rule treats your age as a proxy for what you should be doing as it relates to risk. And there are two very different types of risk. There's your risk tolerance and your risk capacity. There are many people who are they're entering in their retirement season of life that are very risk tolerant. They've built their wealth using stocks. They understand the volatility of the stock market is something that none of us can necessarily divorce ourselves from, especially if we're going to be investors. And they've just resigned themselves to saying, you know what? Hey, I know that the market's going to go up and down, but I'm with it and I'm in it for the long run. Well, the problem is many of these people who are risk tolerant don't necessarily have risk capacity, meaning a significant downside market event can absolutely wipe out their portfolio at the worst possible time, right before they're planning to retire or right after they've retired. And so don't get risk tolerance confused with risk capacity. Age is not necessarily a proxy for risk. So I would completely disregard this rule of 100. I don't think it makes sense for pretty much anybody. And I would just say that there's a better way to do retirement income planning. Okay, so this one might get me in a little bit of hot water because I know that there are a lot of people who have really strong feelings about debt and whether or not you should pay off your debts going into retirement. Now, before I dive into this topic, I would say that there are, debts that we think are good, working debt, and then there's bad debt. So credit card debt, I am not a fan of. Of course, if you've got credit card debt, you should absolutely be working to pay off your credit card debt prior to your retirement years. However, if you've got a mortgage or you've got, a home equity line of credit, something like that, I think we need to take a little bit deeper dive before we just decide what the right path would be. Let's say that we have this $180,000 mortgage and we want to make a big withdrawal of that money to pay off the mortgage. Well, first, if this $180,000 is going to come out of a 401k or an IRA, well, that money is going to be taxable. So we have to think about the tax impact of those dollars because we won't get to keep 100% of it. If you're in the 22% or 24% marginal bracket, we are starting to talk about losing a substantial piece of that money. So if we owe 180, we can't just withdraw 180. We have to withdraw a bigger number to net 180. That's the first thing, is tax paying. Secondly, any type of withdrawal like this or significant tax event prior to retirement could affect our Medicare bill a couple of years later because Medicare IRMA does a 2-year look back. So we could be putting ourselves in a situation where not only do we have a really large taxable event, we also are putting ourselves in a situation where we may have to pay more Medicare premiums a couple of years later. So I would suggest anybody that's looking to do something like this, carefully run the numbers. If you have a low fixed rate mortgage at 3.2%, and you own assets that have been averaging 6 to 8%, and you've reasonably protected yourself against sequence of return risk, you've got some buffer assets in place, then I would suggest building the mortgage payout into your overall retirement income plan. Maybe you want to be a little aggressive and make some extra payments to get that thing paid out a little bit faster. That's okay. But I would think very, very carefully before getting aggressive to pay off a really low interest rate mortgage, just so you can feel like, hey, I have no mortgage, I'm ready to retire. Rule number 4, you will spend less money in retirement. Just about everybody I've ever met or spoken with about retirement wants to maintain their current lifestyle, and they may even want to do some extra things that they don't currently do. They may want to travel more, take more vacations, go see family, go see grandchildren. There's always some extra stuff, but I have rarely heard anyone say, in fact, I don't think I've ever heard anyone say, you know what? I actually want to reduce my lifestyle in retirement. It's just not something that I've heard. But hey, if that applies to you, or you know the people that want to do that, that's totally okay. I'm not saying these people don't exist. I'm simply saying, in my experience, I haven't met them. Okay. But I'm just going to flat out say, don't plan to spend less money in retirement, because 1, I want you to plan to maintain your lifestyle. And if you can, I want you to plan to have some amazing adventures and experiences in retirement. However, don't forget, if we're talking 10 years in, we've got 10 years of inflation, 10 years of increasing expenses. So your overall base lifestyle expense needs have inflated over a 10-year period. Then lastly, when we get into our end of years, or our sort of like the late stages of life, we get into the no-go years. These are years where research shows us that we tend to have higher expenses because we are spending more out of pocket for healthcare and healthcare needs. And so our expenses spike again. So remember that retirement is going to be a very unique lived experience for you. No one else is going to do your retirement except you. If you've made it this far, congratulations. This is rule of thumb number 5, and that is always wait till age 70 to claim Social Security. First of all, this is probably a financial planner rule of thumb, because most people I know have no desire to actually defer to age 70 for their Social Security. Many people are wanting to claim relatively closer to their retirement date or full retirement age. There are some people who've done the math and they absolutely want to defer, but I would say this is not necessarily a rule of thumb for the man on the street. This is more a rule of thumb for a lot of financial nerds or financial planners that have run these numbers and they say, hey, we got to optimize for longevity. And the best way to do that is to maximize Social Security. So first of all, understand, I think Social Security is an amazing planning tool, but just defaulting to we should just wait till 70 is not a rule of thumb that I recommend anybody follow. I really think everybody should get professional help and do some actual calculations and look at how Social Security builds into their specific plan. I would hope that most financial professionals would agree with me that always is a very dangerous word when it comes to planning for personal finance or retirement income planning or anything really in finance. Always and never. Those are two challenging words. But let's talk about this a little bit more. First of all, claiming to 70. One thing everybody needs to consider is their health. If you are in relatively poor health or you have short life expectancies in your family, well, Social Security is designed to be actuarially fair. You get less money early on and those paychecks grow over time, but they're also built around average life expectancies. So it's designed to be actuarially fair. But if you have certain circumstances where you may not reach your life expectancy, well, that math may change. Now, a word of caution here, because if you are the high income earner and you're married, your Social Security benefit will also likely double as the surviving spouse benefit. So that benefit actually lasts 2 lifetimes, not 1. So you got to be very careful with that benefit claiming decision. This is where spousal coordination really comes into play. You have to think through, when you have spouses, how might we claim these benefits in a way that optimizes the benefits for the household, right? So that's where it comes into. You can't just do break even age If you are the high earner, you have to think about that spousal survive or that surviving spouse benefit. Also, if you got a big age gap between the spouses, what might be the best overall claiming strategy for you guys? Or what if you have two spouses who have really close earnings history and their benefits are going to be very close? How would you put that together? Do you claim them both at the same time? Do you claim one and defer another? Or what if there's a big gap? So there's lots to consider. Spousal coordination is an absolute must when it comes to Social Security planning and strategy. So let's tie all of these together, right? The 5 rules of thumb for retirement. You got the 4% rule, the rule of 100, the pay off all your debt, the you're going to spend less money in retirement rule, and you have this always claim your Social Security at age 70 rule. Each of these have some interesting things to think about, and they're relatively good in theory, but this is not something that you want to just follow the wisdom of the crowd. You actually want to put plans in place that apply especially and uniquely to you. The common thread is each of these rules apply themselves very generally and broadly, use averages, and we simply don't want to do that with your retirement. You get to retire one time. You get one real shot at having a successful retirement. And the right plan for you is going to be very specific. It's going to think about your specific situation, your income needs, your tax strategy, your health status, your priorities, your values. Nothing average about you. You are unique. Your plan should also be unique. If you are 5 to 10 years from retirement, or even if you're less than 5 years from retirement and you're starting to realize that maybe these rules of thumb don't necessarily apply to you, that's a great thing, because you know what? You still actually have time to put a plan in place that will be unique and specific to you. And hey, if this makes sense, there's a link in the description where you can start a conversation with our team, if that makes sense for you. If you found this helpful or if this was meaningful for you, go ahead and give us a like on the video, or go ahead and subscribe to this channel. We post weekly retirement education videos, and we want to help as many people as possible. I'll see you in the next one.